We're talking about Soul, the new Disney movie, the new Pixar Disney movie. Do we have to say that now? Is it Disney Pixar, Pixar
I
Disney? I
don't
don't
know. I
know.
think it's Pixar Animation
Pixar.
Studio.
Well,
Oh,
if you
okay.
want to get
Yeah.
specific,
If you want to get
Yes.
specific, yeah.
I guess I do because I went through all that trouble to try and say the title.
they
But
still talk to each other.
yeah, well, I love you guys. So this is the movie that's dropping on Christmas Day on Disney Plus. I'm kind of out of the loop on this. Are people going to have to pay a premium for it like they did with Mulan, or is this just one of those? Did they learn their lesson from Mulan? And like, we're just going to give it to you.
Yes and no. I think this one will, be included, but I don't think they're ruling out the premium stuff yet.
I forget. Did they charge for Onward when they dropped that? I don't think so, right? Or
No.
they did. No.
No, it was
Okay.
no, not for the.
That was because that was and that was
It
a
was
really
in
weird
theaters
thing
for
but
a hot second.
Yeah,
for a
it
couple of
was
months.
like it was dying at that point, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
they were just like, screw it.
Which is crazy because this is the second Pixar movie that we've had this year. Sorry, Pixar Animation Studios movie. And I was really happy that we got to see it early. And honestly, Mulan was a hard proposition because I was curious about the live action version, but I wasn't about to pay $30 for that. I would have paid something to see
$5.
Soul.
I paid
Yeah.
$5.
I would have.
Yeah. It's Pete Docter who gave us Inside Out and Up
Monsters
and
Inc.
Monsters Inc., right?
Yeah.
How could I forget Monsters Inc.? Now, there's my wife and I were talking about this morning because we watched it together last night, and she said, loved it, but I don't think it's a kid's movie. And I was
No.
like, what are you talking about? And then I thought about it for a second. I was so caught up in this idea of it being an animation, this kind of cutesy stuff bouncing around. But she's right. This is a movie for, I'd say, maybe teenagers and older.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's got a lot of really hard-hitting, deep stuff about the human condition. And I'm kind of surprised that I'm very curious to see the alternate universe where this did get released in theaters to see how it did. Because I imagine bored kids at screenings, crying kids at screenings. I don't know.
And I love that. I love that.
That's not a criticism, by the way.
Right. And and I think it's sometimes we default back to that, animation, cartoons equal kids. I understand that, but we who've seen so many animated films that international animated films, American animated films, we know what they're capable of, and I just love the fact that they went for it. An adult character, middle-aged guy, the first Black-centric Pixar movie, which is fantastic, and grounded, kind of and revolving around jazz, which is fantastic. I noticed that right away. I was like, whoa, this is cool because it's geared towards like adults, and it's dealing with this existential stuff, and of course, as soon as they brought in the cat, I'm like, okay, well then now we got to please the kids a little bit here and there. But I was really satisfied with the, I guess I could say the target audience, but who knows?
Yeah.
So I watched it with my whole family, right? So
okay.
Luckily for me, I had a good, quick little focus group. I've got my 13-year-old, 7-year-old, and now 4-year-old. So I've got a good little spectrum.
And they're all girls, right?
And they're all girls.
Okay.
And they're all girls. So I know they'll be honest with me, So, the interesting thing that, I kind of grabbed here, I shared Ian's, sentiments, but it was a criticism for me. I did, that's going to land in my bad section, right? That this can be a little too heady. And, it does get kind of philosophical and metaphorical and all this other stuff that I think only my 13-year-old and up caught, if that. I mean, we're not having deep philosophical conversations after it, but the basic concepts were absorbed. Now, the thing is, I can't let this movie off the hook because of Inside Out. I saw how brilliant Inside Out was, especially with the same director. So it's the same person, in charge. And they were able to communicate, again, heady concepts like different emotions and how that psychology works. They found an interesting way to make that digestible for all ages. And in this capacity, it was kind of like you couldn't get the concepts over, but at the same time, you didn't lose the younger audience because of the cat, but also because of the animation. I actually really like the idea of having these bright little souls. I like the fact that you had these odd, abstract looking figures that are counting all the souls.
Yeah.
Because I'm sitting here looking at my kids watching these things, and in my mind, I'm like, okay, is that an angel? Or is it just a spiritual embodiment of something else? Like, I'm trying to do all this heady, work with it. And I'm looking at them and they're just like squiggly lines, funny character, ha ha ha, and that's it. So in terms of keeping their attention, the movie did what it was supposed to do. Whether it was something that you can like walk away from and like grab and understand, I think it loses the lower audiences. So for me, it does get a knock in that department. But everything else, I mean, the acting is cool. I like the humor is there. It's still a family film. I just think it's one of those type of things that little kids will appreciate as they get older.
Yeah, and that's great. Yeah. That's great. I mean, you could enjoy it, like you said, now, but as they get older, if they can go back to something like this and get more out of it,
right?
It's fantastic.
Right.
And looking at the evolution of, say, Pete Docter's filmography from Monsters, Inc., which was very clearly a kids' family film that dealt with some, kind of adult ideas in there in places, to Up, which was a more mature film that kids could kind of enjoy. It's bright colors, it's kind of action adventure, to Inside Out, which is really going out there. I mean, it's a bizarre and very smart.
We're in there.
Yeah, yes, it's going out there. It's going out there by going in there. It seems like the movies are getting more complex and asking the audiences to mature with it, to the point where, David, you mentioned that the main character is a middle-aged guy. There aren't any there are kids in the movie, but they're just kind of like these little bobbity boops, jumping around the spirit realm, right?
There's students too, which isn't,
But the students are still, they're not like bright and cheery kids. They're like sullen, goof off teenagers.
They're like real kids.
Right. And so this idea of evolution, I'm wondering if Pixar is growing along with, say, Pete Docter's vision. I mean, we had Onward this year, which was sort of more of a family movie, not necessarily a kids movie, but I feel like we got two Pixar films this year, one in the more traditional mold, and the other one, which is Soul, which is just going to places that I don't think we've seen before. I think I don't remember which Pixar movie it was, but it was a couple years ago. We were talking about something. I was wondering if there would come a time when Pixar just starts making movies that are 3D animated films that just aren't meant for kids. Not like gory, violent kind of things, but just, regular movies. Like we have the wide spectrum of film that, isn't just pegged down by the fact that the characters are, happen to be, made of pixels instead of flesh and blood. So I welcome that, but it is a weird place to be in right now, where we're still trying to think about this as, is it going to work for kids? Whereas maybe 10 years from now, it won't even be a part of the conversation. It'll be very clear delineation between, these are the kiddie movies and these are the ones for the adults.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that that's a natural transition. I think it only makes sense. And as the audience is getting older, I mean, think about the kids who, or the viewers who were kids when Toy Story came out, and now they're still watching Pixar movies, but they're like this now, well, hopefully they're still watching Pixar movies. So, I mean, that's a great thing. Like you just said, they're growing up. We're growing up with the filmmakers. So I think that's great.
Or even, Monsters, Inc. That movie's almost 20 years old now.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So the kids who are watching that are, pushing 30.
And it's got great rewatch value. I mean, my kids still watch it.
Yeah, I totally like it. I mean, a lot of that has to do with, just the right casting. I mean, I could watch Billy Crystal and John Goodman, work off each other all the time. But yeah, I think EMan, you just touched on something that really drew me to this, is the animation for sure. The story, I think, is great. And it, but man, I mean, the detail here, and then the creative kind of ethereal, these vaporous type of beings in the great beyond. I was just like, this is so cool. I mean, this is literally is just like kind of thinking outside the box and just like, how can they make something totally different? Because we've seen so many different types of movies, like, when you die, this is what happens.
Right.
When you die, this is what it's going to look like, and what if we just did something that's totally different? And I think that's what they did here.
It's funny you say that, because like when I was thinking about how they did this, one, I always think like, okay, there have got to be drugs involved here somewhere, right? That's always like the first thing that comes to mind. But two, I was sitting here thinking like, I feel like I'm watching a dream. Like, because a lot of times in dreams you can't make out certain things or faces or whatever. And I was thinking, I was like, is that why these people are so abstract, or these beings, and they're not restricted to a certain form? I mean, they could take whatever shape they want. And that's why I was just kind of thinking, I was like, wow, this is really cool and imaginative that they would take a concept of the beyond, but still put it in a way that is open and flexible and fluid. So that way, and I think especially for children, it's a little bit easier for them to grasp, because children naturally have their imaginations and they can just, run wild with it. It's not just, angels and wings flying around and trumpets or whatever,
right.
Or whatever you want to
or
put
the opposite, pitchforks.
It's not whatever
fire and
is out there. It's really just open, loosey goosey, and again, just easier for people to just walk right into and digest. And I like that. I thought that was a really smart move on their part.
Yeah.
The vision of the afterlife, well, I guess we should just set this up for people who have no idea what we're even talking about. There's a middle school music teacher named Joe Gardner, voiced by Jamie Foxx, and he really wants to be a jazz musician. It's been his kind of lifelong dream, or at least since he was a teenager. But he's just had no real luck with it. And he gets an opportunity on the same day to play with a local kind of idol that's always been kind of like his big break would come if he could get to perform in this troupe. And the same day that he gets offered a full-time teaching job at the elementary school, I guess he'd been subbing at or something. And he's sort of conflicted, and he runs across town, and it's really comical, because if you know the premise of the movie, he's going to die at some point, or have some kind of a transition. There's so much going on in the background of things that could possibly kill him. It's very funny, but he ends up going into this afterlife situation, but he doesn't want to be there because he feels like his life hasn't even gotten started yet, because he's just gotten this opportunity. He gets hooked up with a soul of a woman, a girl, a thing named, voiced by Tina Fey, named number 22 out of several billion souls. She's been around for thousands of years, trying to get through this mentorship program that they set up to prepare souls to go back, or to enter Earth as fresh souls. He's trying to con his way back onto planet Earth in a way by hitching his wagon to her or something. So they end up kind of being paired together. There's a body swap kind of a deal where she ends up in his human body. He ends up in the body of a therapy cat in the hospital. Wackiness ensues. I was really concerned when, like, 25 minutes in, they get back to Earth and they're in these different bodies. I'm like, oh, this is just a temporary thing, right? They're not going to be. Oh, this is the movie.
There we go.
It ended up really working for me. I didn't have a problem with it after a while, because there's so much imagination and heart and humor in this screenplay that it totally works. And I should have known to just trust the doctor. But I think that the beauty of this movie is it not only is about trying to find your place in the world, it's about people who are still very much walking around living, who can go to these places that are very positive, getting into the zone of like this spiritual place where you find whatever your creative outlet or your passion is, you kind of are able to touch the spiritual plane. And on the flip side of that, it's almost that version of the pitchforks that David was talking about, sort of a hell on earth, where you fall into depression and insecurity and uncertainty about things, and what that does to this spiritual essence. There's a lot to really chew on here. I think that's why it's particularly apt for teenagers, people who wonder, what am I doing here? Where do I fit in? How am I going to find my place in the world? Adults deal with that too, but especially I think kids who are their identities are still being molded. I think this could be really an important touchstone for them.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Not only them, but like adults, middle-aged adults. Because I was sitting there questioning things myself, like, ooh, am I in the zone? Like, did I lose myself? Like, am I in a rut where I'm dead? In a sense,
yeah,
and I really liked how they articulated and manifested that that notion, that situation, like just explaining that concept, like, yeah, you might be living, but you're not really alive, and I'm just like, wow, that's the brilliance from Inside Out, like that. Now, if you had run with that concept a little bit more, I think it would have been like phenomenal. But I feel like, this also kind of bounced around a little bit, in different concepts,
right?
In terms of like, okay, well, because I'm sitting here thinking like this literally could have been two different movies. This could have been a movie all about being alive but not really living. It could have been, finding your purpose, or finding the meaning of life and stuff. But by the way, just a quick drop. I asked Jamie Foxx.
Of course you did. Of course you did.
Man.
Look, just bear with me.
You asked him about law-abiding citizen too.
No,
don't trip over these names that you're dropping. By the way,
just bear with me.
Yeah,
I didn't have a good question, so I asked him what the meaning of life was.
Oh, geez.
And he gave a pretty good answer. So tune in.
When is that gonna drop?
Hopefully, like in the next day or two. So
okay,
but it was audio, not video.
That was actually video.
I know.
And unfortunately, Disney let me not throw anyone under the bus, but let's just say talent looks really, really good, but not so much on our end.
Call me when you talk to Felicia Rashad, okay?
I will. I would love to.
You're being coy. That's tomorrow at lunch, right?
No. I wish so. That'd be awesome.
Well, so we're recording this a little bit before this episode drops, so please check the description down below on the YouTube channel for a link to EMan's interview with Jamie Foxx. Also, I assume that was part of the greater African American Film Critics Society piece.
Yep.
Okay,
everyone took my question, so I was just like, let's just go for the home run.
Oh, so you did have questions?
I did. I had better questions.
Because you said I didn't have a question.
They threw me at the very,
not a question.
No, they threw me at the end, so I was just like, you took all the good. All right, Jamie, you got the easy one.
You could have been like, remember that time when you were in that piano movie, Ray? That was awesome.
Say which one, because he was in another one too.
Wasn't he? He was in a soloist, right? Was he a piano guy or a violin guy? I think it was a piano.
Remember. I forget.
I forget what instrument that was.
It was kind of forgettable. I didn't.
I would have told him I don't care what people said. That was my favorite Star Wars movie, The Soloist. Sorry.
Speaking of Fox, I didn't really. I maybe purposely I didn't pay attention to who was cast in this movie at all. I just knew from the character design and the concept. I'm like, I don't care. I just want this in my brain.
Yeah.
And in my heart eventually.
It wasn't a leading point.
Yeah, and so later when the credits rolled, I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, Tina Fey. Oh, okay. Daveed Diggs. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So those kinds of things, it was kind of nice. Isn't that crazy that you like trust a studio so much that you like don't care who's in the movie?
Hey, when you build a reputation, that's great.
Yeah,
it's great. Almost like the casting version of Christopher Nolan, because he's got such a reputation. It doesn't matter. Well, okay, you have to set Tenet aside because that's sort of a COVID situation. But like with I'm blanking on the World War II airplane movie. Dunkirk.
yeah.
Yes, that movie was a
Oh, Harry
monster.
Styles, you know.
Well, but what I'm saying is that movie
Yeah.
was a monster smash, even though like people are like Dunkirk, but like,
Right.
but wait a second, it's Christopher Nolan,
You didn't go in it for the star power.
right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you go for the epic war movie type thing.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, that's the same thing with Pixar, and I think particularly with Pete Docter. It's like you could
Mhm.
it'd be interesting to just have a situation where they give some love to non-celebrity voice talent, because I assure you
I
they're
was
out
gonna
there
say,
and they're
like,
great.
I was gonna say, I don't think it needed it. Like,
No,
this could have worked just fine without Jamie Foxx. I mean, I think it was a nice touch to have Jamie, just because, you know, his background is kind of similar. Like, he has
Yeah.
relatable things in his real life to the main character. But outside of that, everybody else could have just been random B-level talent, and I think it still would have been just fine.
well, I like the fact that the the cast that they choose typically disappear into the roles. Like,
Yes.
like Onward. If you would have told me that Tom Holland, you know, Spider-Man and Star-Lord were in that,
Yeah.
I'd be like, what? Okay.
Right.
But you know, because I knew in advance, like I'm like, okay, all right.
I didn't.
But yeah, honestly, if you didn't tell me, I would have been like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that's cool. I mean, it's not like Sean Connery voicing a dragon. You know, it's like, you know, I am the last one. I mean,
Yeah.
that's typically,
that's kind of hard to.
how do you do that? You know, so it's great that you not only cast, you know, the movie, you know, just perfectly, but you know, and you have people who, like you said, Fox has a music background. You know, you have Questlove here.
Mhm.
I didn't realize that was Angela Bassett until credits rolled, and that was
I didn't either.
she played the respected jazz musician, saxophone player.
I didn't know that either.
Dorothea Williams, and I have to say, his intro or our intro to her, I thought that was that's one of those movie moments to me that I'm going to remember in 2020. Just the way the light hits and everything. You see the dust in the air, and she's just playing the sax in the club. I loved her personality, her attitude. His audition with her is just, that was like, it's one of those, you know, 2020 movie moments that I'm just going to remember. I thought that was fantastic.
I was reminded oddly of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom when I saw that.
Well,
I
saw those back to back, and
Same
I was
thing.
like, ah!
Right. Same thing.
Right. Thankfully, she wasn't as
acerbic, yeah.
assertive or
Yeah.
acerbic. Acerbic?
Yeah.
Assertive?
Yeah. Oh, she
All
was definitely
those.
assertive.
Yeah.
But yeah, so going back to this idea of the afterlife,
Yeah.
the first bit we see is of Joe on a weird conveyor belt heading up to this giant ball of light that
Yeah.
looks almost, it's kind of like these stippled, like as it fades off into the darkness, it's almost like stippled. It looks like concept art, like you might see in the making of this movie book. The concept of it reminded me of something that it was a story I think Kevin Smith told. This was either his mom's near-death experience or when he had a near-death experience a couple of years ago. This idea, this idea of, now Joe had a different reaction because he was very clearly panicked and wanted to get back.
Sure.
But what Kevin Smith was saying was that it's the idea of you're going into this place and you see a giant light, but it's like this kind of a force that you're being absorbed into, and you can kind of see these other things just sort of rejoining something instead of going off to another place. It's almost like an energy, like a light bulb that's instead of sending light out, it's collecting it back in and growing stronger. So I was just like, these weird ideas that are not like other concepts that we've seen before. And going back to this this different styles of animation, they almost changed, you know, a few times within certain scenes where you've got something that's multi-dimensional, something that's more two-dimensional. The two-dimensional becomes multi-dimensional. It's almost like the artistic or the visual version of jazz, where you're getting into these rhythms and kind of playing them out for a bit, and they kind of transform, but they all form a perfect, you know, note.
It's improv.
It's. I don't exactly. I would love to see what the screenplay for this looked like and the storyboards and just the iterative process. If they still make a physical media version of this and it came with a like, here's how Soul came together, I would watch the hell out of that documentary, because I honestly can't conceive of how they put it together.
Yeah, it's already slated for early next year. So
Yeah,
there you go.
definitely.
Nice.
Definitely, if you guys get the chance, check out the
Already
round
did.
table,
Oh.
the round table for Soul from Africa. Um,
Oh, cool.
it's they do I think Kemp Powers, the other
Yeah.
co-director. He talks about that. He talks about just how integral jazz was just in the formation of the film, and how important of a role it meant, and basically like all these things, all these lessons, these little sayings and stuff that we get, like all these things come from the love of jazz and stuff, and it does have an application to life, and they take that and put it into the formation of the movie. So yeah, Ian, you're spot on. Like that's it does play a role in it, and for me, like visually, this is what I was talking about, like with the dream, like it was never just one constant thing. It just kept shifting and moving, and and I just love that, because I was just like, this is how you keep people engaged, like on a basic level. But conceptually, I thought it was beautiful. Now I did get a little cynical, because when I saw the light, I was like, that looks like moths to a flame. Like I think I was hearing some screams at the end of that. I don't know, but
That's hilarious.
At
least they didn't go like the conveyor goes up and then down.
Right.
Yeah, I thought what you were going to mention. I'm glad you mentioned Kemp Powers, because I think he really adds a whole lot to this story.
For sure.
He co-wrote it. He wasn't always signed up. This is the guy who he's written some Star Trek Discovery episodes. He wrote the screenplay to One Night in Miami. But
which is great.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
Oh,
but
you'll like it.
I'll trust you. But he really contributed a lot to this. He came on kind of late, but what he brought to it kind of changed the story. I think that it was always about this type of like protagonist, this age, but I think at one point it wasn't a musician, it was like a scientist, and that didn't really go too well. It's like but Kemp Powers always loved jazz. He was in like a jazz group when he was a teenager. Of course, I learned this from, I thought you were going to mention, that's why I said I saw it, was on Disney Plus they have the Inside Pixar shorts. And
that's also good. That's
and his is the first episode. And I think it's only like 8 minutes or so, but it's really, really a great, it's basically just him talking about his involvement in the movie as a writer and a co-director. But what he brought to the role was a very unique and authentic Black experience. And I really appreciated that, because to me, one of the things that just wowed me was the whole barbershop scene. And that was something that he wrote in. He's like, we need an authentic Black space for these characters. And of course we know what's more authentic than a Black barbershop. And this was just, it was great, because in the Inside Pixar short, we're in the car with him as he visits his barbershop, for research and stuff, but I think the fun concept here is that you wouldn't have a Black character who gets a new gig, gets a new suit, but doesn't get his hair done. And I'm like, all right, that makes sense. And so that's why he had that desperate, run to the black barbershop. I thought that was great. And just the characters, but the colors, the detail in that shop, that was just tremendous.
That kind of reminds me of like Birds of Prey, just like how they were doing their fight scene. They were like, wait, I need a scrunchie for my hair. And
right.
Okay, clearly, you got those little details. And it was funny you mentioned the barbershop scene in the detail, because I remember people online, I mean, everybody hasn't seen it yet, but they would see the still images. And I remember in one of the groups I was in on Facebook, they were talking about the barbershop, and other barbers were commenting on the image, and they were like, I want to give props to the mere fact that this guy has got his pinky up as he's doing the lining. And I'm sitting here thinking like, that right there, that's detail. That you got it. You did it. You got it.
Well, that's another thing. The detail in this is crazy, because it is very detailed, and it is the real world stuff feels so very real world, like New York
Sure.
City and everything. But then when you go outside of that, it gets very loose. It's still detailed, but it's so linear or creative or esoteric and everything. And I mean, to say that what I just said is all in one movie, I mean, that's
Yeah. And
that's
they really wanted to emphasize like the specific areas of New York that they were in. I mean, like, again,
that makes sense.
go listen to that interview, because Kemp was talking about just like the little things of, you know, if you're in Queens, if you're looking at a certain mural, you know, you got to have Biggie up there. You know, you can't just have like anybody. No, it's got to be Biggie, Notorious B.I.G., you know, so
even in a Pixar movie.
right, like otherwise people are going to be like, yo, fake.
That's
like,
not
this is not New
Queens.
York.
No.
That's not Queens, you know. So they definitely took incredible care for the detail there, you know, to get the most authentic look and feel.
Oh, for sure.
You know,
I appreciate
Yeah.
I appreciate the fact that there's never like this aerial shot of, you know, Manhattan or whatever or something like that. It's like we are grounded on
like
on
here's generic New York.
Yeah, we're in the street, you know. Even that one scene where I think it's 22, again voiced by Tina Fey, who's in Joe Gardner's body, is just sitting there in the steps, and it's then that she realizes her worldview is opened up, and she sees her environment around her, and it just is a typical day with leaves falling, with the smell in the air, the noise, you know, people playing, honking, cars going by.
I thought that was a powerful moment.
Powerful, very powerful.
That moment right there. I was just sitting there. I was like, my goodness, you guys just showed us how
to appreciate life.
And how we can take life for granted. Just the taste of pizza. You know, the sound of leaves. Just these very little microcosms of life are things that are worth living for, you know, and we ignore them or we take them for granted. And, you know, so I really appreciated that one little slice of moment.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was really strong.
And it's so crazy that this is coming out now during a pandemic, because I really related to that scene, because, you know, I'm working from home, and I sometimes just step out onto my front step and just want to breathe the air.
Yep.
You know, and I just sit down there, and I thought about that while I was watching that sequence, and I'm like, yes, you know, and if it probably, you know, I would probably relate to that maybe just as much, but I think, you know, if it wasn't a pandemic and we saw that in the theater, but the fact that I watched that on a laptop in my bed, and, you know, and I'm like, I could relate to that.
Outside.
You know? Yeah, I can relate to that, because, you know, look, we're slowing down in a lot of ways in our life. You know, we're not taking the bus and the train to work. We're not doing all these things. And I think that has hopefully within the past 8 months already had us thinking about what we should value in life and what we should appreciate, you know, and what maybe we've taken for granted, and the things that we're no longer partaking in can be a good thing and a bad thing. But I think it's really had us kind of slow down and focus on, all right, what is around us?
Yeah.
And I think that moment in this movie is right there, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's you know, there's a scene on the subway, and I remembered like a year ago taking the train a lot of times with you, David, downtown, and, you know, screenings and coming back home in the late nights, and how I took that for granted. I'm like, this kind of sucks. I'm not sleeping, and there's constant travel, and for movies that half the time aren't worth going downtown for. But I was getting nostalgic for it, because I'm like, well, things were a lot different then, but I just didn't know how much I had it or how good I had it. The other thing that I like, the detail that they put into this story about appreciating life, goes back to the idea of the zone and finding your special place when you get into the groove of your talent. But the idea that you can go so far into it that you can get lost in it. And also people talk about, you know, find your passion, you know, pursue your dreams and all that stuff. But if you lose the balance of family, friends, the outdoors, you can find yourself not living while you're alive.
Yeah.
It's not just
Yeah.
people who are lost because they don't know what to do. It's the people who do know what they want to do, but it gets so far out of whack that they're zombies.
And I mean, just to kind of like, this movie succeeded because I think it forces you, if it can force you to think about the concepts, reflect, then that works. And it did for me, because I'm
Mhm.
sitting here thinking to myself, like, my goodness, how many times do I sit here doing my passion, like I'm creating content, YouTube, videos, and I'm sitting here editing sometimes 8 to 10 hours in a day straight.
Wow.
And guess what's happening? My kids are running in and out. Daddy, hey, come and look at this. Daddy, come and do this, come and do that. My wife is like, hey, come and watch this movie. And I'm like, no, I got to finish this. No, I got to finish it, And it's like, I'm dead in that sense, because I'm just sitting here clicking, editing, clicking, and life is just going on all around me. And I felt like one of those sluggish, weird, objects or whatever.
Right.
It takes that moment to kind of break free and just be like, wait a minute, this is going nowhere. My kids are going to grow up like in no time. Let me go enjoy my kids. And, so I like the fact that the movie kind of pushes you to reflect and think about what they're talking about and apply it to your own life. Hey, if that's not a sign of a great attribute for a movie, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I think we've all, we're all creators in that sense, whether we're writing reviews or doing podcasts or videos. And it's tough because, this is not our professional job. We are professionals, but this is not how we put food on the table.
Right.
So in a certain sense, if you want to create something and grow it, you do have to invest your time, but it is a matter of finding that, again, balance. Like there are gonna, it's fine if you spend 8 to 10 hours in a day putting in a video together. If you're spending 8 to 10 hours every day,
right,
making and even, but if that's your job, that's fine. But like weekends and like you're missing recitals and missing rough housing with the kids, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, but you're absolutely right. This is something where everybody who is conscious enough to take away something from this movie is probably going to take away that. And I think this is sort of a spiritual public service announcement, which
there you go.
is great.
I wanted to talk about the what you guys thought about the concept of life in this great before. I mentioned it Great Beyond, but it's actually called Great Before, which I kind of like that concept. So, and this is what, for me, a second viewing will help, or multiple viewings will help. Just to kind of solidify in my mind, like the ins and outs, the inner workings of this Great Before. There's soul counters, there's soul counselors. Did you guys, was it easy for you right away to kind of like gather what was going on and who was what they were doing, and what they were responsible for?
No, I mean, there's these little badges that they have to have filled in with different parts of their personalities or something. There are some concepts in here that sort of breezed right past me that I was like, wait, I don't, like you're saying, David, I'll have to clue in a little bit more on a second viewing now that I know where the main story is going, because there's so much thrown at you that you're not quite sure in the moment what is going to be important. Like, do I have to know about this, filling in these badges, or is that just a detail that's kind of like color? So I was a little bit confused there, but not enough where I was thinking about it an hour later, not keying in on the main plot.
It didn't pull me out of the movie at all. It definitely made me like, oh wait, hold on. Okay, I guess we're gonna keep going. But to me, I think like, I'm sure at some point I'll pick up the Art of book, and there's actually like I saw, I think on Amazon, like a soul journal, and you write down stuff or whatever. But they capitalize and everything. But I want to know more about like what thought process went into these details of this Great Before world, and that whole badge thing. I was like, wait, hold on. Okay, I guess we're not gonna.
I just kind of equated it to like Boy and Girl Scouts. you know, like you just have to earn your badge, you
Sure.
know. So
Yeah.
like when I heard that, I was kind of like, oh, okay, they just, you know, have to learn whatever they got to learn, and they get it. And the counting thing was fine, you know. You know, it's just whatever. I like the idea of the beyond and the after kind of like coinciding, and it almost kind of made me think it was like a circular type of thing. Because if I'm not mistaken, 22 was talking about like, yeah, I learned from like Alexander the Great and from this person and that person. And I was like, wait, shouldn't they have been gone? Like, or did they go to like purgatory or whatever, like waiting state? I don't know. But you know, again, that's not something you know I was like getting hung up over. The only thing I did get hung up over, even though I kind of came up with an answer in my head already, I was like, who was the other missing number? Because they said, man, we haven't like lost track count or whatever since first century. And I was like, I wonder who was this other missing number.
They should do a short on that, right?
Hey, that'd be totally great. But you know, again, it's kind of like, well, I don't know. Like, I guess you could make it a sequel, prequel, or whatever. Yeah. But I just thought it was kind of funny that they threw that in there.
Oh, for sure.
This is a prequel to Jim Carrey movie, The Number 23.
Oh, boy.
Well, one thing I want to talk about, because we've sort of tiptoed around the edges of it, but this is a movie about jazz and the afterlife or the before life. The music. I didn't know who did the score to this, but when it pops up at the end, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, I turned to my wife and I said, what? 9 Inch Nails did the score to this.
Wow.
Hilarious.
And you wouldn't, and they also did, we were talking about before we went started recording really, this team also did the score for Mank, another sort of for your consideration film. So they're right on top of it. But I loved the music in this movie, and I don't know that much about Reznor and Ross as musicians, aside from like The Social Network and some other stuff. But this seems like not out of their wheelhouse, but I just wasn't expecting it.
Yeah, it's cool to see them branch out and do something like really different, and like consciously doing something different, like 4 different moments in this movie, like musically, doing something different musically, not just for their career. Oh, I'm going to be doing soul, something different for us. No, I mean they're actually doing something different in the movie. Yes, we get the typical jazz stuff where he's, like I said, auditioning for his big gig, and we see him get into the zone. We see him hilariously, the first music that we really see him partake in is when he's conducting the class, and it's just awful, and that stuff is always fun. But yeah, I know that John Baptiste also contributed some music too.
I think Jamie did too. I want to say.
I really wouldn't doubt it.
I think he did. Don't quote me on it, but I want to say he did. Yeah,
it's not listed here. In fact, it used to be that they would release the soundtracks before the movies, but this one's this one's dropping on the 18th of December.
Which will be in the past by the time people see this. So go get it. Go get it.
So hard. Yeah, go get it. You can get it now. Yeah. But yeah, I think I'd be really interested to listen to the whole soundtrack as an entire piece, just to see, there's obviously, when you listen to a score to a movie and then go back and see the movie, you're like, oh, that's where this drops. Oh, that's where this was placed. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So what'd you think of the score, man?
Look, I liked it. I mean, it was one of those things where like, I don't usually pay attention to scores. Like if I do, you did something great, to like really, because I'm usually paying attention to the story and to the characters and all that other stuff. So it's rare for the score to like draw me, but I didn't ignore this. I thought it blended in perfectly. Like it every time there was a different mood or there was a different, like it just worked, and it carried me through each of the different stages and the different acts. And yeah, I mean, I agree. It was brilliant. I loved it.
Do you feel like because this movie is kind of revolving around a jazz musician, it made you pay more attention to the music?
I think it just complemented everything, because I mean, when he goes to the club, I don't expect to hear rap music. You know, like like that. Okay, so that's the other spectrum of like a score, right? Like if it distracts me and it pulls me completely away, and I'm like, wait, why are you playing, you know, polka music right now?
Right.
Like this is inappropriate, or it doesn't mesh well, you know. So the fact that I think that, you know, it complemented almost everything, you know, his moods, especially, and like the different tension or lack thereof of the situation at the time, like it just worked for me.
Yeah. There's a trippy aspect to this movie. Of course, that deals mostly with the great before stuff. But there's that one character. What's his name? Moonwind, voiced by Graham Norton. I
Yeah.
thought it was just hilarious. I mean, I would typically think that something like this, that character, his involvement in the story, could have been pretty cheesy
Which one was he?
and heavy-handed. He was kind of
He
like
was-
the hippy dippy guy with the floating ship.
Gotcha. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess he was like this kind of spiritual advisor, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Or guidance guy.
He was the guy that was high.
Yep.
Right.
The guy that was high.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I love how they incorporated him in the real world, which
I did too.
it's like wow, okay.
Well, that, you know, wow is the right word, because when Joe encounters this guy on the street, he's a sign spinner.
Right.
And watching the animation, I was like, I almost didn't understand how I was seeing what I was seeing, because it looked like someone had studied an actual professional sign spinner and then amped it up to 1,000,
It's
you
probably
know,
what they
without
did.
cheating.
Yeah,
It was
probably.
amazing. I could have watched, you know, a whole movie of just this guy spinning his sign.
I mean, it's crazy, guys. Think about what you just described, and then think about when you first saw Toy Story.
Yeah.
I mean, crazy. I mean,
Mhm.
you know, look at Toy Story 4 compared to Toy Story, but
Sure.
it's just mind-blowing. And I think anybody who, this is a different podcast, the whole subject, different subject, but anybody who just discards animation movies because, cartoons, kids. And I'm not referring to what you said earlier at all. I'm just talking about the people who typically don't go, not even out of their way, but don't watch animated features. You're losing out. You're losing out.
Yeah.
Because it's just another genre. It's just another way to tell all kinds of stories. And that's the thing is, like, I mean, during the pandemic, animation production has been thriving. You don't have to meet up with anybody. You don't have to wear a mask. You know, it's like you can work out of your own studio and do all that.
Not to mention, you can tell stories, I don't want to say differently. Well, differently, yes, but like it can stretch your imagination. You know, like I just think of Into the Spider-Verse.
I was just gonna say that.
There were certain things that you can do in that you probably can't, that won't translate well.
Definitely
in live
can't.
action. You know what I mean? So it was kind of like, the animation style, you know, it has its strengths here.
Although I think the new Spider movie is gonna try, but we'll see.
Look, if they cross over into animation, I'm not gonna be too mad.
No, I don't know if they're gonna cross.
Especially if they
animation.
bring Spider Pig in there just for no
That would be
reason.
hilarious.
For no reason, they'll be like, "Hey, it's the multiverse." Okay, all right.
Well, I'll definitely be there for that. Now, that's the other cool thing about, you're talking about animated movies, specifically with Pixar. There's no sense of stagnation or regression every time they come out with a movie. And to think that they've had 2 this year, the envelope is being pushed, and every time you think, okay, this couldn't get more photorealistic, or there are no new, you know, areas to explore, they find new areas.
Yeah.
Like that sign spinning guy. take all the animation styles and stuff out of the movie. That was my key takeaway, because I wanted to watch that over and over again, because again, it's like a magic trick.
I just love that they introduced him in the Great Before. When they introduced him, they're jamming. He's jamming to a Bob Dylan tune. I'm like, there's a Bob Dylan song in a Pixar movie. I got to go tell Michael Smith.
You think he deigned to watch a Pixar
No,
movie?
he actually wants to watch it.
Awesome.
Mainly because I told him that. But
Good.
yeah,
that's the hook.
yeah. But I think you're right. I mean, look at the 2 movies that came out this year. You know, from Pixar. You know, look, their sequels have been great, but all this time, I've just been wanting like new and original content from Pixar, because that's where they really thrive. That's where they do best, you know, and that's where they really reach out. And that's where they tell new voices and new stories, you know, and
and I think that is
Yeah.
actually their strength. I mean,
Yeah.
like, yeah, they can always tell an original story, but the fact that they do it through different perspectives, that is what I think keeps them thriving. I mean, you can
Mhm.
sit here and watch Coco was Pixar
Yep.
too.
Yep.
You know, like you can watch that and it's like, okay, cool. Like, you know, we're shifting gears, but we're on the same ride and I'm having the same amount of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like the movies. They productize everything as we kind
Well,
of discussed
yeah.
earlier, but I just like the idea that this doesn't need a sequel. It doesn't need a line of action figures. Although, you know, if they had like a maquette or something of Joe and the cat, I would totally pick that up.
I would totally put that right by my desk. I'm like, what up, Joe? You're gonna inspire me today.
I can
Come
see
on,
that
man.
as a Funko toy or something, you know, a little.
I'm sure they will have
I
that.
could see
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well-
and maybe, but the cool thing too is like how they came up with the designs of these, you know, great before characters. I mean, they literally, I think I saw something, maybe it was on Disney Plus somewhere, but they basically started like they drew these weird shapes and stuff, but then they made like wire or like I was gonna say maquettes, but I guess that's right. Kind of like little models just of wire figures, and I'm like, this is great because, you know, you start to fully realize something when it's like when you're, you know, building it in a tactile form, and then you have to transfer it into the computer and everything.
You realize that didn't take long. You know, somebody just took like a little frame, bent it like this, and they were like, "No, stop! That's it.
Yeah,
that's it. That's
Well,
gonna be our counter.
Yeah.
This guy."
That maybe it could have taken, you know, a long time to get to that point where they're like it's bent just right.
Maybe it was like super sophisticated, and they were like, "You got to tear it down, tear it down."
Now, the one thing I will say, this had the most disappointing end credit sequence that I can remember in a while, because I understand what they were doing with the sort of the sole abacus, you know, revealing the names of the credits, but I'm like, that's it, huh? I was kind of sticking around. I waited all the way till the part where they started scrolling the names on the black screen, but I'm like, no, it's just abacuses.
I was bummed that we didn't get to see a short. I do believe that the short that they had intended to release, if this was going to theaters, will still drop on you know, Disney Plus, but
I think
you know, that's what you kind of expect with Pixar. It's like, oh, we're gonna get a short and then the feature.
Yeah. Well, this conversation has not been short, but it has been full of soul, and I appreciate that, because we've been talking about Soul. Again, available now on Disney Plus, or actually available soon on Disney Plus. This might come out a couple of days beforehand.
Christmas, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
But this episode may be dropping a couple of days before that. So actually, I got to check the embargo to make sure that I can release this ahead of time. So
I've seen people drop reviews. I want to say it's lifted.
No, I think it's lifted. People have reviewed it. But it's crazy. Christmas Day, right?
There are a lot of Christmas Day movies.
You could spend your time with Diana Prince, or, you know, Princess Diana and Joe Gardner. You know, it's like,
I wouldn't want to spend time with Princess Diana now, certainly. Sorry.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that was horrible. Okay. We're going to leave that here. Thank you very much, David Fowley of Keeping It Real, Emmanuel Noisette of EMan's Movie Reviews. Again, check the description down below to see a link, fingers crossed, to the interview with Jamie Foxx and possibly even Gal Gadot. I don't know, or Gal Gadot. Yeah,
you should find that other one too that he mentioned and drop that in there too.
Yes, the
round table.
Yeah, the full round table. I assume your section was a portion of the round table, or is that something completely different?
Different, right? Oh, I think you just muted yourself.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Oh, so was the round table, was that different than your interview with Jamie Foxx, or is that like a part of it that they excerpted?
Oh, it's all a part of it. I just
okay.
cut my part out. So.
I gotcha. Okay. So we'll include both. All right. Well, thanks guys. Really appreciate this. And we'll be back, I'm sure, talking about something new and awesome either this month, this year, or in 2021, which has to be better than 2020. So until then, thanks. Happy holidays, and we'll catch you later.
See you guys.
Bye.
Thanks.